and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Dan Barker. I'm co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. This week on Ask an Atheist, we're doing something different. We're featuring a presentation delivered at our 2021 National Convention in Boston, Massachusetts. Today's show is pre-recorded, so we won't be able to take live questions. And our presentation this week is by the awesome mother-daughter team of Ann Druyan and Sasha Sagan.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Andrew, for that only mildly embarrassing introduction. I'm so happy to be with you tonight. I feel like I should say I'm very pregnant. Just want to get that out of the way. But I'm not here to talk about the coming generation, but the generation before me. Tonight's honoree, later this evening, my wonderful, brilliant mother, Ann Druyan. She and my dad, the late astronomer and educator Carl Sagan, raised me with a sense of awe and wonder about the universe that you can also find in their many books and essays and the original season of the television series Cosmos that they wrote together and created, that my dad hosted. This sense of the majesty of nature and the beauty of it and the interconnectedness of life on Earth and how much there is to rejoice in nature as revealed by science is one of the guiding ideas in my life, and I'm so grateful to my parents for this concept that now seems somehow to be getting away from us, this idea that science isn't just a way of knowing things, but a source of deep beauty and understanding, and that it can be, we have this idea sometimes that facts are cold and hard and that science is so devoid of emotion, and I think that my parents' work contradicts that so beautifully in so many ways, and so many of us crave that feeling of being part of the grandeur and part of the majesty of the universe, and the idea that there's a way to feel those feelings and understand that deeply in the information in our DNA, the cells in our body, our place in the solar system, the information that we are able to glean almost every day, a new revelation that brings us deeper understanding of who and where we are. I think there's so much beauty in that, and so much of the profound understanding that we crave. And I'll tell you a little something about the way that I grew up and the stories that were passed down to me through my parents' elegant and colorful, beautiful storytelling. And one story in particular that comes from my mother and from her family that stayed with me powerfully from early childhood. Her grandparents were Orthodox Jews who came from Eastern Europe. And her father, Harry, was born in New York, and he lived to be 99. I knew him very well. He was one of the closest people to me, my grandfather, Harry. When he was a young man, growing up with the customs and traditions and beliefs of his parents, they were passed down to him carefully, and he got a little bit older, and he enrolled in college, the first person in his family to do so. And from Queens, he went into Manhattan to attend New York University. And you know how it goes when you go off to college and get cosmopolitan and skeptical. And this happened to him, and he started to question. And one day, he decided that he was going to have to tell his parents that he had had a change in his philosophy. And the way this story was told to me by my mother, I can picture it so vividly getting on the train and that feeling of having just a lump in your chest when you know you have to have a difficult conversation, and getting home to their house and finding his father davening, praying, and waiting for him to finish, and his father looking up at him and saying, you know, "So happy to see you. What are you doing here?" And Harry saying, "Look, I've got to tell you something. I'm not going to go to shul anymore. I'm not going to keep Shabbat. I'm not going to keep kosher. I'm not going to do all of these things because I don't believe. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of it." And his father, Benjamin, looked up at him and said, "The only sin would be to pretend." And that idea of openness and welcoming a different philosophy and letting go of the sense of rejection and personal slight and forcing belief on someone else set Harry free. And he was able to be secular, which he was for the remaining 75 years of his life or whatever it was. And he and his father remained close. And this idea, this almost mantra, that the only sin would be to pretend, that going through the motions doesn't do anyone good, was so profound. And it was this idea that that my mother, you know, by telling this story and in the ways that our legends, our family legends, our all kinds of legends have to be retold to children in order to be remembered. I can picture hearing it, and it stayed with me as a real crystallization of the ethos of my family. The other phrase, the other sentence that stays with me powerfully as a perfect crystallization of a similar ethos is this one line that appears in the novel Contact. It's the only work of fiction that my father ever published, and he and my mom collaborated on the novel and the film, as they did with everything that they wrote in the 20 years that they were together before his death. And the line is, "For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love." And it's a line that my mom wrote. And this idea that, you know, when we zoom out and see ourselves as this pale blue dot, as this tiny world against this enormous vastness of space, where we don't know if there's anyone else out there or anything else that happens after we get to spend a blink of an eye here, it's hard not to feel a little anxious, you know? There is a tightening in the chest that comes, and the existential crisis is something that, you know, many of us have to go through. But on the other side of it, once we accept the brevity of our time here and the mysteries unsolved about what else there may be, what do we have? What is the solace that we can find that is true and real? And I think that it's one another. It's that we're on this little lifeboat together at this moment, against so many unlikelihoods, so many tributaries in history that could have gone another way, and still here we are in this moment. And I think that those deep connections, an appreciation for this moment and our place in this vast universe, the consciousness and awareness of being here at all is so profoundly moving. And for those of us who don't believe that there is anything else or don't claim to know that there is anything else, you know, there's often a sense of cynicism that can come. And I often talk about this idea that my parents were so good at teaching skepticism without cynicism and finding the joy and beauty our place in the universe as it really is and as we're able to understand it, opposed to either leaning on things that are not substantiated by evidence, or just letting the fear and the existential crisis take over. And finding that line, I think there's something so profound and so magnificent as we view ourselves as smaller, as our picture widens from our, over the last few millennia, from our little communities to our world, to our solar system, zooming out further to realize that our galaxy is just one of many, and that there is vastness in all directions that we can only begin to comprehend. I think that there's something deeply profound about taking solace in knowing that we're in it together. And those lessons bestowed to me by my parents are one of the reasons that I'm so grateful for them, and my mother is so deserving tonight of this honor. And also that, for those of us who don't believe that everything happens for a reason, who do not believe that there is rhyme or reason, that there's a system in place to which, the good guys will get their reward and the bad guys will get their comeuppance. I think that there is something, there is an impetus on us to make the world, to make the world more fair and more just. If we don't think that there is any other way for the things to even out fairly, I think that there is an argument that it's our duty to through this philosophy and through this way of seeing things, motivate ourselves to fight to make the world more fair, where maybe more of those things will happen, and there will be more evenness to how it all shakes out. And that's something else that my parents taught me, and I think that is really an honor to be here talking tonight about my mother before she receives this award. And for those of you who don't know, I'm not really introducing her because there's going to be a song in between, but I feel like I want to say a couple of accolades about her. She and my dad co-authored 6 New York Times bestsellers. Everything that they worked on together, it's very easy for me to hear both of their voices braided into it and combined to create something more beautiful and more amazing than either one alone. And she was the co-creator of the motion picture Contact. She's an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning writer and producer and director of the 2nd and 3rd seasons of Cosmos. And she's just very newly minted honorary doctorate of the Free University of Brussels. She's just come from there. And, I feel just an enormous sense of pride for the legacy that she carries on and that she has created with my dad. And I think that there's so much of a sense of beauty and awe for the universe as it truly is, where we can look at a secular worldview, a humanist worldview, not just as a reaction to religion, but as something that is in many ways more ancient and more traditional, because if we go back far enough in human history, beyond the horizon of names of ancestors we know and customs that we, carry on, eventually all of us, no matter our backgrounds, no matter our ancestry, the most traditional, the most ancient rituals were looking up at the night sky, trying to understand where we were, sharing these moments together with our families around a campfire. And, this idea that understanding nature deeply as it truly is, and our sense of, for lack of a better, perhaps more secular word, our spirituality, our sense of awe and wonder at the grandeur, that these are separate is something that my mother likes to call post-Copernican stress disorder. You know, this, which is so brilliant, such a great way of thinking about it, that I think there is a way to find that feeling of our deep connectedness and not forsake our understanding of science and our evidence-based view of the world, and go back to a perspective where those things were one and the same, and find the beauty and joy in that view of our tiny place in this grand universe. Thanks.
Well, first of all, I am humbled to be with this community, a community whose embrace of reality is so completely central, not only to, as Sasha said so beautifully, an appreciation of the romance of life, of the beauty of life, of its ancient continuity, of the need for us to stand up for life now at this crossroads. But also, it is so completely central to our survival as a civilization. What is called for? What form of human agency can save us from ourselves at this moment, when the destruction of our environment and our climate casts such a long shadow over our future? What is it, if not the fearless embrace of reality? What is it, if not the employment of an error-correcting mechanism which will give the highest rewards to those who prove our most cherished beliefs are wrong? This is what we need now. And how do we reach our fellow citizens and inspire them to embrace this perspective, this way of looking at things, this error-correcting mechanism which has the power to save us from ourselves? We know that science can deliver the goods. You can't lie your way to Mars. You can't get there. Every step of every spacecraft mission is something like 100,000 people deciding to tell the truth about what they're doing. And of course, there are redundancies and ways of preventing disaster if one fails. But it's a chain of trust that people believe that it matters what's real. And so, to be with this community that feels so strongly that we have to face squarely what are true circumstances in the universe, what existence really is, what the little we know about it. That's why it moves me so much to be here with you tonight and to receive this award, which I have to say I do not feel worthy of. There are others who've been given this award because they were willing to risk their very lives to tell the truth. Not me. All I did was follow my bliss. As Sasha so eloquently stated earlier, I had a loving family, grandparents who believed had a totally different worldview than mine and my parents, but who did not believe in a God that was so weak and defenseless that they had to punish someone else for not believing in it. They actually did believe, which was the amazing thing. And that gave me a model of what it is that when a person really believes something, they are secure. They don't have to resort to violence or cruelty because they believe what they believe. And I honor that, even though that's not my personal belief. Because what I think is called for now is not just an adherence to reality, the kind of adherence that science demands, but also fearless acts of kindness and love. Because the basis of our disagreement with people who are traditional believers is not amenable to logic very often. I'd like to recall for you a kind of miracle, a secular miracle that Carl Sagan performed in the early 80s. He was asked to testify in one of the so-called creation science trials in the South. He was asked by the ACLU to be a friend of the court and to testify to the court, to bear witness why the notion of creation science was a kind of oxymoron. And he gave his testimony, and about a year later, he received a letter from the opposing expert witness, the creation scientist, who had been his opposite number. And this man had given up his job teaching creation science and gone back to school to become a biology teacher. I know, it was. And I can still recall his letter very clearly, although it's been so much, way more than 35 years since this happened. And what he said was, if you hadn't have been so patient and so thoughtful, and if you hadn't listened so carefully to what I was saying and taken my questions to heart the way that you did, with such humility and without any attempt to demean me or my beliefs, I never could have seen the truth of what you were saying. But you were so open-hearted to me that I felt I had to pay attention to what you were saying. And once I began to pay attention, I realized that my life was unraveling, that my belief system, that what I had completely staked everything I had on, was worthless. That's what's called for. It's not the haughtiness. We all know how good it feels to hate. We all know how good it feels to feel superior, to say to ourselves, to see that figure on television or online and say, I'm better than that person because my beliefs are so much better, because my identity is so bound up in those beliefs. But that's not what is going to grow our community. Sasha mentioned that I just came from Brussels, from the Free University of Brussels, which was founded in 1834 as a way for higher education to break the stranglehold of the church. And their motto is, science vanquishes darkness. It's a thriving community. They know all about you. They know all about the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They were very excited that I was on my way here. And they asked me to tell you that they want to join with your community. It's an enormous university with more than a third of its student body coming from around the world, vibrant, young. And it was thrilling to address that group and to see all of the hope and conviction on the faces of these young, intellectually curious people. And so, what I'd like to suggest is that winning the argument is not necessarily going to get us where we want to go. That there is a need to embrace and to welcome and to talk positively, because I think that we have a better story to tell. We are talking about a continuity of life that's 4 billion years old just on this little planet. That's something so precious. We're not talking about a disgruntled parent who, in Diderot's fantastic formulation, loved his apples more than his children. We're talking about a family of life that includes every living thing on this planet. We have looked at other planets in the vicinity, just a few, just a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the multitude. And to see them is to know how magnificent our little world is, and how worthwhile it is to fight for its future. So, thank you for this award. Ever since I was a child, I always loved the story of the emperor having no clothes, and the idea that it matters what's true, and that you should stand up and say what you see, what you know to be true. So I will try to be worthy of this wonderful award and your great kindness to me. And I'd just like to say that, I think of myself as certainly one of the most fortunate people who has ever lived. I spent 20 years with Carl Sagan, who was as extraordinary in his capacity for love as he was in his genius, his intellectual prowess, his learnedness, his courage. So I feel like I've seen the best of us. And now you've all seen the love that exists between my beautiful daughter and me. What more is there, really, in life than such goodness? Thank you so much. Really honored.
Thank you for watching this week's Ask an Atheist. If you like what you saw, be sure to join us at the next FFRF National Convention. This year it will be in San Antonio, Texas, October 28 through 30. Confirmed speakers include the best-selling author, John Irving, Texas journalism legend, Jim Hightower, atheist and LGBTQ Nebraska state legislator, Megan Hunt, and many more. We would love to see you there in person. We'll be back next Wednesday at noon Central with FFRF's Ask an Atheist.